Okay. Okay. And it is recording. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So who are we missing? Okay, Bob's on now. Okay. So let me see. So we have, I think we're ready to get started. Melissa, I think we're good.
Oh, her mic's on. Her mic's off.
Okay.
Hi, sorry about that. I think I'm good now.
Okay.
So I was having some issues. Okay, so I'd like to call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Education of District 31. Roll call.
Melissa Chu Valentinez,
Here.
Laura Greenberg, Stephanie Frank, Robert Reese.
Here.
Okay. Jeffrey Steries,
Here.
Maria Vasilopoulos,
Here.
Nancy Hammer,
Here.
Kathy Loria,
Here.
Erin Murphy.
Here.
Thank you.
And Tina, I think Laura's mic was muted,
Okay,
so I don't know if you said her. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. So next thing is additions or changes to the agenda. We did have a certain board member who had submitted some requests for board norms, and we got some feedback from other board members, some in support, some questioning them. Since this is a discussion that's appropriate for a board self-evaluation, we will just be discussing today setting a meeting for a board self-evaluation with the IASB to discuss these norms and include them in a broader set of norms for the whole board. We've been talking about this for some time now and had actually been in the process of trying to set up a meeting with the IASB, and then COVID hit. So Erin, I believe, was going to reach out to Dee Molinaire with the IASB to get some dates. So that will be something that we'll talk about today to, and just for transparency, a lot of those norms were focused primarily on remote meetings. And since our board does its best to maintain professional, appropriate behavior, most of those norms are being followed. But since there were members who would like to have more conversation about it, Erin and I talked, and I spoke with the board members. So we will address this at a board self-evaluation, which we hope to have very soon. We'll talk about scheduling that tonight.
Perfect.
Melissa, thank you for that. I would like to add to the agenda of tonight's board meeting the adoption of board norms for remote meetings.
I
as
think
a
we need to have
group
a discussion to figure out
That's
what
fine.
the norm should be. I don't think we should add it as an agenda item for tonight.
And we're not going to add it as an agenda item specifically because we will be covering that in the board self-evaluation. And Jeff, you and I have had many conversations about how norms, we should be having a meeting with the IASB representative to have those discussions. So I appreciate that, Jeff, but we're going to cover this and we'll address it and we'll get a date on the schedule as soon as possible. So that's going to be something we talk about tonight.
Thank you. As a board member, do I have the right to add something to the agenda?
So we are not going to have that discussion. The final say on the board, on the agenda is the superintendent and the board president. So we
Because
will be talking
I
about
do not have the right to add something to the agenda if it's not approved by the president, is what we're saying.
Yes. So, but we will talk about it. I'm not trying to dismiss it. I believe that I agree with you. I think it's important. I agree with
It's gonna be too late.
So-
It's going to be too late. These are not board norms that I was suggesting, as you mentioned. These are board norms for remote meetings.
So,
I
And-
can't go to the agenda. I can't say anymore.
so,
Um,
and actually, I do believe that we will continue to have remote meetings, at least for the next several months. And I would ask that everybody's read the norms and recommendations. And I would just say that most people follow them anyways. And yeah,
So I will adopt them, but hey,
all right.
Can I just
So-
ask one question, just because I'm new? It's not about the board norms right now. It's just that my understanding has always been, and I think that's written in our policy, that any board member can ask to have anything put on the agenda, and it's not the board presidents nor the superintendent's say to deny a request of a board member to put something on the agenda. So I'm suggesting that be looked into and get some
Yeah.
clarity on that, because I recall that's what you're saying is not true.
No, and Maria, I understand what you're saying because, and this is something that I agree with you. I think we need clarification on because there have been several examples in the past where board members have requested things put on the agenda. This is going to be it's a question of when it gets put on the agenda. Doesn't necessarily, and past practice has been that not every request gets put on the agenda for that evening. We are going to be discussing this. It just won't be on the agenda for this evening. But I agree with you, Maria. We probably do need some more clarification. This does go again to board norms. It goes to what's our practice because while my understanding for years was that any request by a board member for the agenda would be placed on the agenda, that has not been the practice. And this is for that evening. So this is something that we will put on the agenda at a later date.
We can move on from this, but past practice shouldn't dictate, it shouldn't overrule what the ISB recommends. So
agreed.
let's make sure we're following those protocols and not past practice, which may or may not have been flawed. So.
No, I appreciate it. And I think this definitely merits further discussion, but we have a very packed agenda tonight. So we'll move on. And recognition of the audience, were there any requests?
Yes, I have 3 and I will read them now.
Great.
The first one is Lisa Brown from Northbrook, and I'm going to read her comment. It's hi, district, our board members and District 31 administrators. Please below find 3 questions I'm hoping you can address during tonight's Board of Education meeting. Thank you. Plans for e-learning. When will you share the plans for in-person versus remote learning so families can prepare in advance? This will help parents, guardians better prepare from a logistical standpoint, but also give parents, guardians time to prepare their kids emotionally for what next year will look like, since it will be different than what they're used to. Student teacher placement. Can you share more information of how student and teacher placement will work for the 2020-2021 school year? I understand the Illinois State Board of Education released guidelines which include the consideration of looping teachers and students. Is the administration considering both for the upcoming school year? Both are solid solutions for providing added comfort for our kids, helping to catch them up academically, and easing the transition into the next grade during this unforeseen time. I'm concerned about the added stress and anxiety a new classroom and teachers will bring if we start the year in some type of remote setting, as it is difficult for kids, especially those in grades K-2, to develop connections through an iPad. It's also important to note that our kids' current teachers know how our kids learn best, where they need extra support, and personal things about all of them so they can still make those connections virtually. Our kids need comfort, support, and consistency. There are so many unknowns right now, and we likely won't have all the answers going into the fall. I'm curious to hear any additional updates on how student-teacher placement will work for this upcoming year, and if you will consider keeping current classmates together for the next school year. Bus. Since the plans for the upcoming school year are still to be determined, it is difficult for families to make a commitment to the bus by July 1. Beyond just the cost of the bus, families haven't received any information on what safety measures will be put into place should the kids return to school in August, and what happens to the bus and fee if school isn't physically in session for the full calendar year. These are key factors in helping families decide if they are comfortable with utilizing the bus service next year. For example, my daughter is supposed to attend Apache Day Camp, and they announced this evening that they are still running a 5-week camp, but with no bus transportation. It is drop-off pickup only, as the bus was deemed an unsafe option per guidelines released from the Restore Illinois. With camp ending only a few weeks before the start of school, I'm curious what this means for busing in the fall. I understand the bus company needs time to map out the bus route, and there are still so many unknowns. However, we need more information before we can make this commitment. When will administration release additional information about the bus service for next year? How are other districts in the township handling this, given we are all dealing with the same concern? And if bus ridership is down, which is likely, will other measures be put into place to manage the car line due to the increase in use? And will you be increasing the bus cost for those riders that plan to use it? I can answer briefly because I know this is a concern. We are going to talk a little bit tonight in the presentation about next year, so hopefully that will answer some questions. But I also know, at least in terms of timeline and process that we're using, in terms of, and so hopefully we can address some of those. Student teacher placement, can we share more information about how student teacher placement will work? You know, in one sense, we're waiting for some enrollments to determine how many sections we need for each grade. And we're looking at the strengths of the teachers and what's good for kids. And it's a hard situation because not all families even want even that looping. So I will say that that is part of our planning process, but not necessarily the top thing that we're considering. Right now, we're looking at how we can provide a system to welcome all of our kids back to school pre-K through 8 with the most amount of stability and social emotional support. And then buses. We will be working with the bus company. I believe we have a meeting in June to talk about buses and what that is going to look like for the fall, and what it would look like if following the guidelines for a phase 4. And so we're interested to hear what the bus company has to say. District 27 is the one joining us with North Shore Transit. So as soon as we have that specific information, we will definitely communicate with families. I totally recognize it's hard to make that decision and to sign up for buses. And Kathy, feel free to add anything. We don't anticipate fees going up for buses. If it's not a safe option, we will certainly let families know that as well. So, is there anything, Kathy, you wanted to add to that?
So just a little bit about that. We have been working with the bus company to provide them with some data. So when people do sign up for bus, it's just like a flip of a switch to get that student activated and on a bus route. So we've already provided them some information so they could get started on the routing. But until we talk to them about the fine-tuned items that we have to look forward to and figure out, I don't have much more information about that right now. I know that it's impossible to separate as many children on a bus. The number of bus routes needed would be an impossible number to reach, should it be only a certain number per bus. But since none of that is defined yet, we are not sure where we're going with this at this point.
Okay. The next public comment, Allison Slade from Northbrook. She wrote, I noticed you have approving contracts for administrators. Can you please share about the performance evaluation metrics the board uses to rehire administrators? I'm not looking for your actual evaluation. I know that is confidential. I'm looking for the template of the evaluation for different positions. We do use the metrics for the principal evaluation metrics. I didn't see the I'm trying to remember, for like professional standards for administration. I'm happy to pull together a template of what that looks like. Third comment is anonymous, and it once again is, can we share the plan for the fall and opening that we're considering, and will we be providing masks for students and teachers? Will students have gym? Will students go to lunch in the lunchroom? Will there be busing, and share information for parent planning? And once again, I have a presentation that won't necessarily answer all those questions, but will tell about the process. And those are the 3 questions at this point.
Okay.
Aaron, am I able to add a public comment as a board member? And resident?
I am not sure about that.
Unfortunately, I couldn't type it because I didn't have the link for it, but I'd like to.
I mean, I think typically, while using this format, the comments are through this and not.
Okay, I'll withhold. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Next will be a presentation. The first is the NSSED financial model. I believe that Jeff, you were the board representative for the NSSED meeting.
I was. Yeah, I was, but I believe Kathy's walking through the model.
Kathy and I and Jean, we're all gonna present it. So let me pull this up. Share. Okay. Okay. So we want to make this brief. So for those of you who are listening, NSSED is our special education co-op. And we use them for a lot of our services to support our special education students, especially those with the most amount of need, whether it's through some early childhood services, professional development, our life skills program, or for some outside placement at North Shore Academy or the elementary school. So they are a partner. We're part of this co-op. How many? I think there are, Kathy, 18 other districts in the co-op?
Yes.
Okay. So as a member of the co-op, we pay fees in order to get the different supports that we need. And over the last number of years, costs always seem to be increasing, but there's been a lot of push for some more transparency in the costs, to better understand the costs, and to really have equity among the costs. So over the last year, members of NSSED representing the finance, the special ed, board members kind of developed a new financial model that would not go into effect for next school year, but the following school year, that would need to be approved at their next leadership meeting. And so we wanted to go over that model so our board would know how to advise our representative, which we still have to determine, on how they want to vote for this. So the first thing is that we want to talk about is a little bit about, and let me actually go to present here. Pull this up really quick. Sorry, I have 2 computers running so I can see my notes. So these are some of the variables and the funding variables that they are looking at when they're looking at that model. And Kathy, feel free to jump in at any point. For example, students to staff ratios is how many students do they have with each staff, and they really work from a model of they can't set up a ratio. It's really based on student needs, students with the most amount of needs. You don't want to limit them by how many staff. They coordinate our special ed transportation. There's facility charges. Kathy, do you have anything to add?
Oh, sure. So these are the key funding variables: IDEA funds, the average salaries, charges for PD, student staff ratios, like Aaron mentioned, Medicaid, the non-members surcharge. So that was recalculated, how the facility charges work, transportation, and year-end balancing, and then, of course, our fees as well. I'm having a hard time seeing the bottom of this, but anyway, you could go to the next slide and I'll talk a little bit about these main components of the new model. And the main goal of the committee, basically there were people from the finance committee that were working to develop this model, and then there was a subcommittee. And the main goals were to define the cost of the program and how they should be shared between members and non-members. And as Aaron said, provide more transparency, because the the cost of the program was difficult to understand, and it was harder to budget for the districts because the program cost wasn't defined as well. But they were looking for some that would be sustainable, equitable, and a more flexible model so they could provide the whole continuum of services. So maintaining a membership fee, this has changed somewhat in an attempt to equitably share the costs across all members. And the membership fee includes, covers 100% of the superintendent's department payroll. And this has stayed the same from before, but the piece that changed is it includes 25% of other admin costs, including the business office, and board costs and related superintendent charges. And the more equitable sharing piece is to avoid the high usage districts, which we are one of them, from supplementing this cost for other districts. And then accessing professional learning. Districts are, this piece has been in place, but districts are to contribute to this conversation of what they would like available for professional learning. And when they come up with a group of professional development activities, those particular ones would be covered under your fees. Now, if you ask them to do personalized PD training, that would be a separate charge, but we at least are allowed the opportunity to give input on that. The other piece that has been somewhat of a problem for us is instead of using a cooperative approach, if you needed services where the staff was very experienced and their salaries were very high in that program, you would have much higher program rates than others. So what they've tried to do is average the salaries and spread that out among the programs. So it was more of a cooperative sharing. Another piece that was put in place is that evidence-based funding credit that is received was used to be included in the cost of the programs. So the committee wanted that pulled out so we could actually see the true cost of the programs. And this is meant to credit the district with the funding share based on the current year's enrollment. And it used to look back at the previous year, but this is now going to look at the current year when it's determined, and this is also no longer a benefit for non-member districts. So it helps the member districts a bit more in their costs. And then they looked at the methods for charging, and when they looked at the facilities maintenance charge, that refers to the cost to maintain the buildings on the Red Oak campus, and districts would be charged based on general ed enrollment. And this is the property, plant, and equipment that was valuated at $23.8 million. And this actually belongs to the members of the co-op. So that's why this charge is in there, because since it belongs to the members, it's the responsibility of the members to help keep up. And then any service usage, they changed from the way they bill. It was in hours and minutes, and now they're changing that to charging by full-time equivalency usage. And that's how more cooperatives bill in that manner, and it facilitates the tracking of the usage as well. And then the program usage, and also instead of being charged in hours and minutes, it'll be charged by actually the average daily enrollment. So service is by FTE, and then program usage is by average daily enrollment. And then when we get to the IDEA and Medicaid funds, what used to happen was the IDEA monies would go through the cooperative, and they should really go directly to the district, and then the state made that mandatory. And so the schools now, the individual districts will receive that money, and if they choose to use it to pay part of their NSSED tuition, they can. That is the practice we have been using. So now we have more control of those funds, which everyone believed that we should. And the Medicaid practice will stay the way it is. Any service process to get Medicaid reimbursements will come back to the district. And then the number 7, non-member surcharges, these are already in place, but as I said, they were recalculated by using ISB cost sheets. And currently non-member surcharges are calculated at 17.1%. The maximum surcharge could be 30, but the committee suggested moving forward with 25, and that would keep NSSED competitive in the market. And then the cost sheets, which you'll see shortly, they will also be adjusted with credits for the evidence-based funding credit and the non-member surcharge. And then the last piece of that is once you've had usage and you've paid the bill through the year, they do an end of year reconciliation to make sure that nothing has been overpaid or underpaid, and the services that were provided were appropriately invoiced. So that's a piece that's going to possibly result in an additional invoice or credits back to the district. And then other minor changes were, I know Aaron mentioned the staff to student to staff ratios. And again, it's just to meet the legal needs. But NSSED requires districts to forecast their needs by February 1st of the year before. So this coming February, we would be forecasting our needs for 21-22. And they will also be developing a brochure which shows all the definitions of anything having to do with the program. So that was in an effort to be more transparent and make people aware of how things were being billed.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add a comment here. So do you mind, Darren?
Nope, not at all.
Okay. So what this chart shows is it says old model projected FY20. So that means currently this is how we're being charged. We're considered the old model here, even though it's current. And then they took the new model and projected what FY20 would look like. And so right here, it shows that for District 31, under the new model, it's lower. But the difference there is basically the credits that would be applied back to our costs. So instead of those credits being in the programs, they're applied as credits afterwards. So it actually shows like a 4.38% decrease. And again, that will all depend on the final calculations. This is just a draft, nothing to, hold your hat to or feel that this is final at all. It will change by our services, and the cost sheet will show a new method to be able to plug numbers in and see what our costs are going to be. And out of this page, I think there's only 4 districts that actually will, based on this information, will see an increase in their tuition costs.
And then this is more of our member pricing worksheet where it breaks down the costs of everything under, just as before it was the new model versus this year's projected costs. So this is not what we would pay next year, but this is applying the model to this current year cost. I noticed one big change is in the membership fee. And for me, this is regardless of how many services we use, the membership fee is what we have to pay. And this is kind of the fixed rate. And so that is a rate that does go up. It used to be 19,000, just under 20, and now it'll be under 61. Other elements in here, all of these services depend on the needs of our students. Some of these are, we have so few students that we're going to have to rely on NSC to provide it. Assistive tech, OT, PT, vision, speech language, LEA contractual, that is one of our school psychologists we hire through NSSED. And that is the rate that we pay. That is, what if we chose to go in another direction, we would not pay that. And then the nursing is part of the fees that we pay for our Winkleman nurse, as well as having some oversight with a school certified nurse. And then the second page of this, NSA is North Shore Academy, NSAE is North Shore Academy Elementary, EC is Early Childhood Programs. So you can see where we are with some of those fees. And then here on the bottom are the different credits. And that's how they get to the various amounts.
And the one that, excuse me, I didn't mention was the housing credit, because we house the early childhood program. So even though a facility charge is included in the cost of the program, it ends up being somewhat of a wash for us because we pay it in the program, but we get it back as a revenue credit. And then the other big difference you'll see is you will no longer see that $53,795 that used to go straight to NSSED. It will now be staying with the district, and then we decide how to use that.
Then just some key last minute, just some detail. This model needs to be approved at the June Leadership Council meeting. This does go into effect until FY22. FY21 will exist under the current model. This model estimates are based on funding District 31 will retain instead of giving to NSSED, but some of those are based on the funding that we get, and that can be variable, especially right now. We will be exploring options available to us with the newly approved intergovernmental agreement with township schools, especially in the area of early childhood, and maybe the ELS program. So those are some areas where we might possibly see some adjustments going into FY22. And just to comment, we'll always need to utilize some of NSCD programs and offerings, even if we retain programs like early childhood. NSCD is definitely a need that we have. So Janine, Kathy, are there any other key points before we open it up to questions?
No.
Okay. Are there any questions?
So I have a question. Since we do need, first of all, we need someone to attend the June NSSED board meeting. And I can do that. I'll do that. But what is the recommendation?
I think our recommendation is to approve it. I mean, we need to look as a district how we can look at our costs. But they have done they have set out to do what they need to do in terms of transparency. And so although there are still some things we'd like to see overall, I think Kathy and Janine are nodding their heads. It would be good to approve it, knowing that as a district, we need to look really carefully at our expenses and see if there's a better way to do some of those things.
So my question comes from, and the membership fee jumping, so much. We're looking at over three times as much. My question is, I know that we've had some discussions about trying to see what we could pull in-house and service ourselves. So that's where well, will we lose benefit because the membership fee is jumping so much? Not that we shouldn't continue to do what we need to do, but that's where I don't have knowledge.
Right. And that's a hard part looking at this, because when we look at what could we save, a lot of those things are like, well, we could have our own OT and we could see how much that costs compared to this, or we can look at early childhood and the membership fee is that one fixed rate. However, their explanation does make sense about why it's incorporating all of those items. So it's not, probably they were more hidden costs in other areas before. And now it's a much more transparent cost, saying here's the membership fee and what it covers.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
So this is not necessarily a vote, more that if Melissa is going to the meeting, what do people give thumbs up in terms of having her say vote yes from the District 31 board?
I'm supportive.
Let's see.
Okay.
Is anyone not supportive?
Oh, Daphne, you're muted.
Are they doing the meetings like this too?
Yes, they're remote meetings right now.
They are.
Okay. Okay. So it sounds like we are fine with moving forward and having our representative vote yes.
Okay.
Okay.
The next presentation is the fiscal year 21 strategies, focus, actions, and planning process and timeline.
Yes. So let me once again share my screen. And I think this one will be a lot longer because I think this is where everyone's heart is right now, is next year. I mean, we are at the end of this school year. We are all living through, wrong presentation. We are all living through this right now. And there are a lot of questions there. And we have some answers and other things we are still looking for. So we just want to put a lot of information on the table, get questions, and let people know how we are going through this planning process. There is no question that as we look at planning and strategic planning, there's a shift in priority focus for next year. COVID-19 will continue to be the major factor in our plan. So things that we were really excited might be taking a back seat because reopening the school in a different way and making sure we have the highest level academics and social emotional support and all those other elements is going to be our focus next year. We're going to need to meet the student academic needs. We know that there's learning gaps. We need to make sure there's quality instruction. We need to make sure students have the supports they need. We need to make sure we have our technology up and running. I'm so grateful the board had the foresight 6-7 years ago, maybe even longer, to say we need to go one-to-one technology because this has made our transition all the easier. We need to continue to evolve sectioning and leveling practices to support students. And I think that speaks to one of our parent concerns early on. How do we support our students and how do we make sure every single level of kids gets that support and that teachers are teaching and supporting the grades levels where they have the most level of expertise, because we also need to make sure that students are getting the highest level of expertise at each grade level. We need to figure out how to assess students. Meeting students' social emotional needs, I think, in a sense, it is equal to meeting student academic needs, if not even more. We know that there's trauma related to the impacts of COVID-19. We know that we need to make sure that we look at these connections that were lost with students and how we rebuild them in whatever format we are in the fall. We need to provide supportive programmings at all levels. And really, we need to really figure out how we can support parents in all this too, because you're on the home front, you're living this every day, and we need to support parents. Some of our other focuses, instructional resources and tools to be effective in both a remote learning environment and an adjusted in-person environment. There is no doubt that when we go back to school in the fall, that it is going to look different than what we are traditionally used to. That is quite clear, and it's just trying to shift and figure out what that looks like. We need to figure out the best use of our workforce and the strengths of people and our different jobs and responsibilities within the district and how we can maximize that. How do we supervise and evaluate staff if we can't walk into classrooms or you're minimizing the amount of people in a classroom? We want to make sure our communication strategies are reaching parents. And I think the safe environment, there are the sanitation strategies, the environmental strategies, how we're arranging furniture. As always, we know we need to be fiscally aware as we face the unknown. There's a lot of economic challenges, not only for our families, but our school district, and some expenses related to a lot of this. And we want to make sure that we are fiscally aware. And then there's all the other important work that we're doing that we don't want to lose sight of either. So it is a busy year ahead of us. Preparing for the school year in light of the COVID-19 is going to be our primary focus. But we hope to still address all the other issues. But we just wanted to put that out there that this is where the focus of the work is really now. And there are so many questions for fall. I started writing down some of the questions, and this is not an exhaustive list by any stretch of the imagination. But, I've heard people say, well, what happens if someone in the school community tests positive? What are our next required steps? So we are, working on the plans for those steps. Will students and staff members be required to wear masks? And right now it is looking that indeed students and staffs would have to wear masks. We have a survey going home about masks tomorrow. It's a one question survey just to get some feedback from parents. What will the modifications be to schedules? If modified schedules are a requirement, will students schedules provide parents the ability to return to work? I think that's a hard part here, because as we look at modified schedules and look at that as a possible option, we want to be very mindful of the fact that at the same time, parents may need to go to work and childcare is not always there, and we're trying to balance and support families in a lot of different ways. Do we have the infrastructure? What procedures and protocols do we need for safety? How are we going to work with our partners like Quest, North Shore Transit, and Adventure Campus? Logistical concerns about recess, bathroom use, entering and leaving the building. I've had questions about extracurricular activities and interscholastic sports, IEPs, and how to support students, especially those who need hands-on support. Looking at our contracts, mental health support. So there's just so much and that we are asking that you can see it's a really complex issue. But I think the biggest question right now is, what are we doing now and what do we know? We're doing a lot of things right now. We are collecting a lot of information and research. I think we are in meetings all the time, looking at the updated guidelines and needs. We're meeting with local and state officials. I met with local and state officials yesterday, and we are saying, okay, so what is the guidance for Northbrook and Glenview? What is the guidance from the Illinois State Board of Education and the Illinois Department of Public Health? And that's where we're advocating for some guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois School Board of Education. We have heard that guidance will be coming from the Illinois School Board of Education, the State Board of Education in mid to end of June. The reason this guidance is so important, it does not mean we're not planning without the guidance, because things can change in a dime. For instance, right now, we are functioning under remote learning guidelines from the Illinois State Board of Education that defines how attendance is taken and how many guidelines for different hours of instruction. If that shifts and changes, then our plan has different structures to it. If the Illinois Department of Public Health says you have to maintain X feet away, I mean, we're functioning under the 6 feet guidelines right now. But if they come out with something about buses and it's not something we thought about, then we will shift our plan. So we're advocating for that to come out sooner rather than later. That was a big conversation among the local superintendents. Right now, we know that we need to update our e-learning plan. We know that there is a possibility that we will need e-learning in some way, shape, or form next year, whether it's we start the year in e-learning or we have to go to a hybrid model of both, or at some point in the year, there is a spike in cases and we need to move to e-learning. So we're doing parent, student, and staff surveys. I will talk about the parent results this evening. We are looking at the guidance from ISB. Right now, our e-learning plan is based on the remote learning guidance. The official e-learning legislation is very different than the remote learning guidance. I received word this afternoon that there is a bill on the governor's desk to be signed that will kind of shift and that will kind of merge some of the e-learning and remote learning guidance, and that'll be really helpful for us to continue along that process. We're collaborating with school leadership team, and we are planning to actually get an e-learning plan approved in July following the legal requirements, which we were exempt from this spring because of the emergency, which includes a public hearing, which includes board approval. So we are working on those e-learning plans. Our regional superintendent is giving as much guidance as he has, and says to go forward and get them approved to the best of our ability, even if they don't completely match the law at this point. We are assessing physical space to determine the numbers of students and staff we can have in the classroom. Yes. Yes.
Erin, you are in and out.
Oh, I am
you
sorry.
You are in and out. I don't know if it's just my phone. I don't know. It might just be mine. I can work on it, but you're in and out.
Okay.
We're good here.
Okay. Then keep going.
I've had her stop a few times. And
Yeah,
then
it frozen a couple times. But
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll keep on going. Stop me if I need to. So we're assessing our physical space. So one thing we're doing is we're using our architect, which is Archon, to come up with a space plan for our spaces to see, okay, if we take out the furniture in the classrooms and only bring in what's essential and we bring in desks, how many kids can we safely have following the social distancing guideline? That information is really important for us to have in terms of how many kids can we have in a room, and whether we need to go to a hybrid schedule or can we fit an appropriate amount of kids in the room. And at the same time, then doing that inventory, saying, okay, so do we need to have desks instead of tables, and really assessing our space for those furniture needs that we would need to have for those spaces. We are in the middle of sourcing needed PPE for students and staff, and other safety materials. We are we are purchasing sneeze guards for offices, masks of all sizes. It is difficult. Disposable children size masks are harder to source. One of the survey question really has to do with cloth masks and do we provide a cloth mask, and what are parents comfortable with? Hand sanitizers, infrared thermometers, as the big conversation today in the township really had to do with, do we take temperatures? Is that really a part of the requirement? We're maintaining alliances with villages and neighboring school districts to share resources, information plans, and do joint purchases as appropriate. We have found that if we pool our purchasing, we're sometimes more successful at getting the volume of things we need. While District 31 will create their own academic and educational and social emotional plan based on the needs of our community, there are safety plans that are really important to do as an alliance with our villages and neighboring school districts. Our kids attend District 31. They also attend District 225. We want to have some commonalities in how we deal and with different issues that come up related to safety. We share bus services, and we want to make sure there's commonalities. We share Quest with two of the other districts. We all use Adventure Campus. So when we talk about the need to maintain alliances with our villages and neighboring schools, it's less for the academic programming and more for the supporting programming, because we need to make sure we're utilizing our resources and that they're able to support all of us. And we know our students, as more and more sports are opening up and other things are opening up, our community is very small and kids are intermingled together. So we want to have a standard safety protocol for how kids enter buildings, thermometers, what we do if we have a diagnosed case. And that's where some of these alliances really make sense. We're really asking for people to register to the best of their ability for the fall, so we get a sense of class sizes. If we have a lot, and I know, and I feel for parents who are saying it's hard for me to decide until I know what next fall will look like. And we're doing our best to get that information out to you as soon as possible. We're allowing students to keep their devices if they're returning in the fall. We're doing summer curriculum work built around supporting our evolving programming plans for the fall. We've kind of put a halt on everything else and said all the work we're doing this summer is really to support the start of the year. As I said, we're working with our outside vendors on merging safety plans. So that helps answer that question about buses. So what is North Shore Transit saying about buses? Is Quest willing to do grab and go lunches? I'm sure they are. What does the Northbrook Park District need from us in order to support after school programs for our students? And are we able to do that? We're looking at the sanitation and preparation of the physical plant. Our buildings are already cleaned and sanitized every single day, but we are continuing to come up with those sanitation processes. And we're participating in and planning appropriate professional development. I think our minds are spinning with the amount of information and what we're doing. So what about the plans for the fall? We're building draft plans. We want a specific plan for what things looked like in phase 1 or 2. What is the plan for phase 3? So if we have school in a phase 3, because we know it's completely possible for us to move backwards in these phases. So we're trying to define in a phase 3, which I think we're moving into now, what would school look like, and how then is it different for phase 4? Within each phase, the plan will address the following: instructional programming, operations, personnel, safety, professional development and training, and communication. So what does it look like for each of those phases? And we want to define each of those areas and help explain it, because it does look really different. If we're in a phase 3, we are definitely in an e-learning format. If we're in phase 4, which says you can have up to 50 kids with masks and sanitation, that's where we're looking at those protocols to say, can we do it with everyone in the building, or do we have to do a phased one? And if it's phased, what does that look like? Is it certain kids go every day because they're the most needy, or is it's a split? And that is where we'll also get feedback from our families. As we develop our instructional programming, which includes development of 3 different models, the first is school is fully in session model. We know it won't look exactly alike. There'll be adjusted schedules and routines within the building, but we would welcome everyone back with the safety modifications, because that is what is allowed by the Illinois Department of Public Health, the Illinois State Board of Education, and we have met the requirements in order to do that. Some of those requirements are not fully out. We will have our all e-learning remote learning model, which allows, we're adjusting our current plans, the ones we're using now, to allow for that student, staff, parent feedback that we're getting, and to meet the requirements of the Illinois State Board of Education, and indeed to exceed the requirements, which we're currently doing. But we want to make sure that if attendance counts, if attendance doesn't count, or whatever we're instructed to do, that we have those elements in there. And then we're creating the hardest one of all, which is that hybrid model of remote learning, which is that mixture of remote learning and site-based learning. And there are a lot of models out there that we're looking at, whether it's a week on, week off, half days, which are more difficult because of cleaning in between every other day. But we also know of the challenge for families. With each of these plans, we're focusing on safety, social, emotional health, and academic health. Our timeline for developing the plan. Right now in May and early June, the administrative team is meeting together to collaborate on the different plan elements. Our new director of curriculum and instruction does not start till July 1st. She is joining us for some of our meeting sessions that we have set up in order to help give us feedback. We will bring these plans to the SLT and DLT and any appropriate staff to start getting feedback, and we're going to gather feedback from staff and parents. In June, I'm guessing mid to end of June, we want to have an advisory committee of administrators, teachers, so 4 from each building that would be drawn from the DLT, SLT, so our school leaders, and 5 parents that are drawn from parents from existing committees, our safety committee, our BPAC, which is our bilingual parent advisory committee, our SPED advisory committee, our education foundation board, and our PTO board, and a member of the Board of Education, to do a remote meeting where we will present a variety of plans. It's not necessarily to make decisions, but to give feedback. What is working? What don't we see? What questions do people have, so we can refine the plans, give an update at the June board meeting, and then have something fully out there by the beginning of July, so parents can make decisions and parents know what's happening. But that feedback piece, I think, is really important because there are things that parents are concerned about that are different from what teachers are concerned about, which is different than the lens that administrators are using. And we really want to make sure that we are getting that feedback in there, so we can see what the pitfalls are and make the adjustments that we need. I fear if we just say, here's what a hybrid learning plan looks like without this feedback, we would just go back to the drawing board once we got the feedback. So we want to do it in a very mindful way. So before I go into the remote learning survey, let me stop here for questions.
Erin,
Yes.
I believe that we have parents that would like to ask questions. I understand that there isn't a mechanism right now with the YouTube Live. Is there a way that we can get these questions answered?
I think they would have to do it through the form.
Okay. And it's the form then in the link to the board meeting?
Yes.
Oh, Google form for public comment.
Yeah.
Okay.
So far, the only additional comment was, is there a way to share with the public the proposed board norms that were previously discussed during the open session tonight?
Sure. You
Yeah.
can do that.
And I know, what everyone is craving is, this is what fall will look like, or here are the definitive 3 plans. And we're working on them. Are there any other questions while I check to see if there's any? Or should I go on to the remote learning survey?
I would say go on, and then when the presentation's over, we'll check again.
Okay.
It might take people time to
Okay.
type it out, maybe.
Okay, so the review, about a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, we gave a parent remote learning survey. This was open for about 10 days. It was shared on social media. It was emailed out twice. We had 195, and actually I should not say complete responses. We had 195 responses, not all of them were complete. And we offered it in 4 different languages. I just want to go through some highlights of it. This is all students. This is not by grade, but our internet access is actually pretty high. And our biggest challenges are that some people's internet access isn't as reliable as they would like. And maybe because there are too many people utilizing it. Communication has been pretty clear, 60%, but there's definitely room for improvement. And so that's part of the plans, is to figure out how we can continue to improve our communication. Our EL supports, most people who answered, 82% had not received EL supports. And of those that answered, it was kind of split between, we completely supported the students, mostly, somewhat, and not at all. These ones I broke up by K2, 3, 5, 6, 8, because the experiences of the 3 grades are different. And as we evolve the plans, we might see differences among the 3 grades. So this question asks, how would you describe the amount of schoolwork assigned by your school during remote learning? And you can see for the young kids, it's just the right number of assignments, not enough assignments, and too many assignments. This too many assignments really narrows as the as we go up the grade level. But it really looks like people either think we did, it's right on the nose, especially with the 3-5, but they'd also like to see more and some more work and assignments. What e-learning option would work best for your family? In the younger grade, with all grades, it's more structured schedule with specific times to log on and or complete assignments. The young kids had a little bit more of the on-demand learning, and that was less. I will say that surprised me. I thought we would have more of the on-demand because of some challenges of getting all the everyone set up on e-learning. But this really shows us that people really want a schedule of, at this time we're doing this and this time we're doing that. And I think the feedback also shows having that very consistent schedule. This is to the timeframes that we're using. These timeframes were given to us by the Illinois State Board of Education of how much active engagement should a student have. And for the little kids, it's only 90 minutes, and then it goes up to 120 for the 3-5 and 180 for the older kids. And no, not anyone feels like it's too much. It really is split between these timeframes are appropriate, and we'd really like to see these should be broadened, and we want to see our kids engaged in work longer. And that's a balance that we're going to have to do with screen time and everything. But that does tell us that part of that schedule is to make sure that there is a little bit more, that there is more work and engagement time. This is all grade levels have the same answers. What are the following reactions to remote learning? Does your child regularly express. And it's really that this is where we're getting into that social emotional and missing teachers, classmates, sports, that sometimes they have difficulty working independently to complete the assignments. And even we're seeing, especially as they get older, prefer staying home to attending school. So for some kids, they, for whatever reason, they prefer staying home to attending school. And this really tells us that we need to work on some of those connections between all the different kids and those relationship building. What's most important to parents is access to, this is not in an order, these are what popped up, was that access to devices, mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning, having some time limits so they know how long kids should work on something, daily face-to-face time with a teacher, and having very specific schedules. For mental health, that kind of goes back to that connection, is social opportunities and one-on-one time with teachers and social workers. Here is some feedback, and I just summed up some of the written responses. We asked parents, what are the 2 most helpful things staff did during remote learning? Because we want to know what we did well. But what's interesting is that sometimes something we did well also showed up on what they wished we would have done or not done. So that really points to just differences in different families and how they used remote learning. But for K2, people really like the face-to-face time, the flexible schedules, the pre-recorded videos, the teacher check-ins, the one-on-one time. Communication and connection came up a lot. And at the same time, as people are asking for more schedules, we got a lot of thank you for the consistent schedule in those grade levels and the alternating day schedule people liked, although we got feedback the other way as well. 2 things you wish staff had done during remote learning. So these are the wishes. And once again, that's better management of the meets. Can we set up some guidelines for the meets? Really having more blue days or academic days and minimize the gold days. I'm just highlighting a few of these. More direct instruction, trying to send assignments early, and especially in the younger grades, we heard that printing is a challenge. There was too many things to print. So we really need to work on making sure we can minimize the amount of printing that a family needs. For 3-5, 2 most helpful helpful things staff did during remote learning. The block schedule was praised, that there's a lot of positive praise going on within the classes, that there was one-on-one times, that there was a PowerPoint structure of lessons to provide structure and set expectations. They like the daily schedule, the flexible due dates, instructional videos, that the teachers worked to limit some of the screen time, and that there was good communication with parents. And they really wish staff had more longer-term projects, more one-to-one time, less video and more live instruction, maybe having assignments sent to parents as a PDF or an aggregate packet of work, parents getting the schedule the night before, increased frequency of academics, no weekend homework. For 6-8, a lot of it had to, that the teachers let some of the meet times be used for social interaction. They like the weekly updates. They like the block schedule, the videos, that the teachers were demonstrating a lot of care for the kids, that they were alerted for absences. What they really wish that staff had done differently was maybe have a later schedule so kids could sleep in, more feedback for parents to track assignments and participation. So how could they know if their kids weren't doing the work, longer classes, more reading assignments, maybe open up the email so parents could send in some of the work or help their kids differently, more physical activities. So I'm going to turn to the administrators for a minute to kind of view what are the some of the takeaways we got from the survey. Nino and Erica.
Nino, you want to go ahead with K2?
Mm-hmm. And Nino, if you could just check the live stream, because I just got a message from someone saying they're having a hard time hearing the live stream. I don't know what you can check, but thank you. Eric Berger.
Sure. So at the 3-5 level, and we've heard this a lot tonight, is talking about the increase of face-to-face time with teachers and with students. You know, we're going to work with the Winkleman SLT team to develop some clear expectations in terms of how much time teachers are going to need to spend with students face-to-face and online, and then also thinking about how much time we can have students also interacting with one another through Google Meets and various online applications. We also need to create a happy medium of work time for students. We got a lot of feedback about the schedule and how much work is actually being given, how much academic work is being given, that there is not quite an equal balance. A lot of that work we're going to be doing with the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction to design some more well-balanced lessons and assignments. And with that, we'll be able to redesign that weekly schedule. And we will work with SLT to figure out how we can have equal teaching time and equal plan time among all certified staff. There were many parents at the 3-5 level that had stated they would prefer academics take place on a daily basis and that perhaps co-curricular classes only happen once a week. Of course, when we look at things contractually, we need to make sure that we have equal teaching time, equal planning time, equal work time, all of those kinds of requirements.
And April. Dr. Miller.
So yeah, a lot of the information we got from parents is really going to be helpful as we start to review our process and make improvements. One common theme we saw was we need to educate the community as well as continue to educate ourselves on what are best practices in e-learning, because we're definitely seeing that some families feel like there's too much screen time and some feel there's not enough screen time. And so we're really going to work on trying to find that mixture. What's the perfect mixture of asynchronous and synchronous learning? But a lot of that's going to come with learning, and that's learning for staff, students, and the community at large. We need to resume our regular scheduled communication. A lot of the feedback from this survey at the middle school level was a lot about not getting the communication. And I know that when I started analyzing that, we normally do a bi-weekly electronic progress report, and that was suspended during remote learning. So that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. We had monthly newsletters letting parents know exactly what the content was for each month of instruction, and that also was removed during this time. So those two pieces really need to come back, and I think that will address a lot of the concerns about communication. And making sure our grade book is even though we changed it, that we still make it user-friendly so parents understand how to look at the information. So communication as a whole on all levels, staff communicating more with teachers, the building communicating more with parents. So that is definitely an area we're going to be working on. And then this last one is just so important to middle schoolers. The social opportunities for kids. The main reason they want to come to school is to see their friends and to be with each other. And it's frustrating for them right now because they don't have a lot of opportunities to socialize online or collaborate. So we definitely need to look for how we can integrate that more into our remote learning because it's just so important, especially at this age.
And then Janine.
Good evening. So with special education and student supports, we are going to continue to review and revise the individualized remote learning plans or e-learning plans. Currently, parents received letters letting them know what type of learning plans and information that students were going to get. But this will become part of the IEP. So parents will actually give us more specific feedback, and this will be done either at an annual review meeting or within an amendment to an IEP, so we can actually get specific feedback from families on how will that learning plan look and how will it actually be incorporated into an IEP. Students with 504s or receiving intervention or English language service will also receive revised plans or letters in the beginning of the year. We'd like to incorporate more face-to-face time, groups and on-demand learning. We think that this is really important for our students. I'd like to continue to use the blended service model. We did currently use a face-to-face and activities and check-ins. I would also like to continue to establish teacher office hours and have that more of a consistent schedule with our staff so parents and students know exactly what times those office hours will be there for help, not just a check-in or a paper check-in, but offer that homework or kind of that tutoring help, and then really focus on the social emotional learning for all students. We've been really talking about collaborating and focusing on returning to school using trauma-informed strategies. And that's really focusing on building strategies, building relationships, and promoting that consistency among all teachers. And how are we going to build relationships? And then also looking at, how do we form those groups? Is it going to be lunch buddies? Are we going to have social emotional learning, throughout the school day, or advisory groups with social emotional learning groups? So really talking about looking at those informed practices, because we know that all students have been affected by COVID-19 in some manner.
Thank you. And then we do have 2 more surveys going out about remote learning: a student survey before school ends, kindergarten through 8th grade, because their feedback is important, and then a staff survey. And we use some of the feedback from the parents is being used to help guide the staff survey, so we can ask some specific questions on how we might do some different things, and also get the teacher feedback about what worked well and what they would like to see improved too. So we are diligently working on getting that remote learning plan adjusted based on the feedback, and then developing the hybrid and the in-person plans. There were 2 questions, I think. There was one comment saying they couldn't hear Nino, so that was one of the comments. Danielle Stern said, if a student has to quarantine because a family member is exposed or gets COVID, will the school provide e-learning for that otherwise healthy student while the other students are in school? So part of our plans that we will need to develop is how to support students if they are unable to come to school for health reasons related to this issue, even if they are currently healthy at home and they are not able to come to school. So so that is part of that e-learning or hybrid plans that we are developing. This next question, Allison Slade asked, those watching on YouTube cannot even remotely see the slides since we can see all the faces as well. This presentation was not in the packet. Can you please post it publicly and send it out? I will, we just finished, I just finished the presentation today. That's why it wasn't in the packet, because I was gathering some information and going through the data. I will be happy to attach it, especially, I send out board briefs tomorrow, and I'm happy to do that. Then there was a comment saying they couldn't hear Nino, but we solved that problem. And then a few more additional questions. How are we encouraging folks in our community? This one is from Lisa Brown. How are we encouraging folks in our community to register for the fall 2020-2021 school year, since it seems that enrollment is still low? And are we planning to hold off giving devices out over the summer unless students are registered for next year? And then she had, will the plan you present in July include more specifics on how we'll support the social emotional health of all students as well as the other elements? What are you hearing from teachers and staff? Are they concerned about returning? Are there concerns with teachers leaving? And thank you to the administrators for sharing the survey results, and a special shout out to our first grade teachers and teacher assistants. They've been amazing. We love hearing positive things. So let me just address those. We are encouraging, in fact, we've seen a growth in amount of families registering. I have the numbers that I'll present later on registering, and we are encouraging and we're asking parents to sign off that they are intending to return. We're trying to find that balance between supporting all of our kids and supporting our families who are still asking questions but intend to still be part of our community. And I think what we can do right now is encourage people to register and continue doing in-depth communication as we come up with new ideas and information so they can feel more comfortable with it. In the summer, I've been so used to communicating with everyone every Friday. And usually in the summer, you can say, okay, I'll take a deep breath and we won't do as much communication. And I think this is not a summer where we're going to hold off on communication. There'll be continuous updates as we get it, because we want to be transparent with our families. That's one of the reasons we want to have parents part of that feedback committee. And we're pulling from those existing groups. But we will continue to encourage. We have reached out to families and called different families if they haven't registered to find out what their intent is. And actually the waiver is also helping us to find out who's intending to come back as well. Yes, our plan in July, in June and July, as we present updates and the final will include social emotional learning. As I said, the academic learning and the social emotional learning, there's not one of them that's more important than the other. We know right now that supporting our kids social emotionally, whether it's because they're feeling a loss with connections, we don't know the loss that the families have had, how they've been impacted by this, just their fears and frustrations. And really, as we can all see in all of our kids, mine included, just missing that social dynamic on a daily basis. So we want to support that. And then we've been forwarding different things that we've gotten about different webinars for parents. We want to continue to do that and even see what else we can do that's generated by District 31 to support parents with that. What are you hearing from teachers and staff? Are they concerned about returning? Are there concerns with teachers learning? I think some of the components that you saw that we're trying to address is our staffing and our teaching. Our staff is very much a part of our District 31 family. We love and care for all of our staff. And just like our parents, I mean, they're dealing this with parents or adult parents, or, you know, this has impacted everyone. I think everyone is yearning to return to education. At the same time, they have to balance it with the safe and responsibility. I think there is fear out there, and this is where there's some advocating being done by the superintendents of the area about plans, because most of our staff members live in districts outside of District 31. So if our plan is coming back to school or a hybrid, and their kids' plan is a hybrid, but they're on different dates, there's that fear of how can we balance that? And and that makes some of these planning really difficult, because we are trying to support our family and community, our students and their families. And we're also really listening to our staff and their concerns, because they need to be the ones who are, they're our front lines with our students. So I guess that's a long answer to, are we concerned about returning or concerns about teachers learning? I think there's a concern about how the state of Illinois is going to manage this. And there is a call by the superintendents to ask for at least some regional consistencies in what they're asking districts to do. Because we do share things like our staff members have kids in other districts that they have to balance, that we share buses, we share food service, we share our special education co-op. So the more consistency we have, I think the more success we're going to have with opening up a school. So if you're looking for something you can do, it would also to be advocating for that in whatever format you can, is for some regional. I don't think we're necessarily looking for statewide guidance, but regional, since they're basing plans on regions. And there was a question. Okay. And I think that was all the public comments for the presentation. Any questions from the board? I tried to be as swift as I could.
Erin, I have a question.
Yes.
And this may be something that's still emerging. Has there been any direction about, like, say we have a teacher that's high risk, say a cancer survivor, or someone's had a heart attack, or a child that's high risk? How are we going to handle that if either the teacher decides to stay home or if parents feel it's not safe for the child?
And I think
sense of that?
we have not received guidance yet. There has been lots of discussion about that in the various groups I'm in. I think the kids are a very different issue than the staff member. And I think the kids is when we work with the doctor and the parents, because there are already things put into place to provide homebound tutoring, but I think homebound tutoring will evolve. into this kind of remote learning hybrid. And in one of the comments asked, if a kid has to stay home and they're otherwise healthy, well, some of our kids are immunocompromised, but they're otherwise healthy unless they're. So I think that is something that we are trying to put in the plans as you see the complexities of these layers upon layers upon layers, that we don't want to come out with just something when we know that there's all these layers. I think teachers, it's a little bit different. Once again, there are kind of the existing HR mechanisms, but we're also waiting guidance like they gave us this spring for the shutdown of what we needed to do. We want to support and keep our teachers healthy. And one of the things that I put in the presentation is we're looking at how we are using our staff.
Sure.
And I think that is the question. That's part of it, is how are we using our staff?
The other quick question I had was, I know we've all seen images of, non-Western countries that have returned to school with masks, and a couple of Western ones. But I do worry about K-1-2 learning with masks, because those children learn so much by watching face.
Right.
Anything around that I think would be,
and that is where
even just sensory kids, like, I just don't know. I don't see a room full of sixth graders not fidgeting so much with their mask that they negate the purpose of it, because they're just touching their face. I don't know how that works.
That is a concern. And that's some of that guidance, and that's also when we're looking at how can we keep those groups, how can we utilize our staff? Part of the guidance is if you can keep kids apart, the mask is there. We also know how difficult it is to keep young kids apart, but we also have to normalize some of this. I've been doing lots of research on my own, just in terms of what are the best types of masks for kids. I'm fortunate to have my own little guy that is now a model for like 8 different kinds of masks right now, and I make him try them on and wear them for a little while, just to figure out what's the best option out there. Because I don't think any of us like that option, but it's that balance of, okay, if that's the requirement, is it better for them to come and kind of try to normalize the masks as much as we can with those who we can? If my son was going to return to daycare next week, he would have to wear a mask. Anyone over the 3, 4, and 5-year-olds were going to have to wear a mask all day as tolerated. So I will say something else that we're doing is we're developing plans. And as I say, I wish I had a full plan to put out there, is there are lots of things that are opening up in the next month. There are daycares that are opening up more wide. There are camps, the Northbrook Park District, the Glenview Park District, and other camps. There's sports and activities opening up. We're keeping a really close eye, and that's part of our network of communication, to see what's working and what's not working with those camps, what's working and not working with those sports. I mean, if they're successfully able to have sports, that impacts whether we have sports. So we're really trying to watch what's been going on and how they're doing it and what the kids' reaction is to things. So that's part of the research that we're doing, and I feel like we're fortunate to have some of those.
Erin, I'd be curious to see what the state comes up with for gym.
Mm-hmm.
There's several kids that have asthma or have exercise-induced asthma, and wearing the mask. I mean, I'm asthmatic, and it's really hard to wear the mask for a long period of time, especially I can't imagine doing it with exercise and gym. So I'd be curious to see what the state says.
It'll be curious. And right now we're also looking at some of as different sports are coming out, because I know baseball is starting up, hockey's starting up, and looking at what are the guidelines they're using and are they working? And that'll probably help us inform some of our PE decisions and how we do it.
Have they talked at all about temperature checks as kids are walking in the door?
Yeah. So there's 2 rules of thumb. I mean, on one hand, we're getting, there's some legal advice saying, unless you're mandated, don't do it. On the other hand, there's that advice of we want to do everything we can. And so one thing that we are doing, and this was a decision made yesterday by our township, I think I mentioned that one area where we do want to be consistent. I mean, we can do education in a way that works best for our district. We don't have to be like everyone else. But one way we want to be consistent is through the health. Like, are we doing temperature checks township wide? What do we do if a student has a temperature? Where do we do it? And because part of it is the logistics. How do we check 600 kids walking in the building at one time? So we have put together a subcommittee of a school nurse for each of the districts and the high school to create these safety recommendations for our districts that can be common. So they're going to dig through the different research and go, okay, it is recommended that we take temperatures or not. And then if we do, we're going to use this type of thermometer. This is the temperature threshold. If a kid has this temperature, they're going to go here for a second round and then, and kind of do. So that's an example of what they would do.
The other thing I would consider doing is maybe some form of education for especially those parents that need the school as childcare, because those parents are the ones that send their kids to school many times when they're sick because they have to go to work. And in this time, what's going on, you can't do that. So I think we have to educate them and make sure that they're not doing that.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with you that I think there's going to be an education component, and also letting parents know that there won't be a lot of my child doesn't feel well and we're going to let them sit and rest in the office for a while. It really will be, we're going to take risks this year. We need to go home. And, one of the other things I think this nurses group is going to look at is contact tracing. So that way we have a better sense that if a student tests positive or their family member, we have a better idea of the kids that they have been with. And that's part of that planning that we're doing. I mean, every time I talk, it's like the different complexities. I could create a web in my home office now of all the web of what we're doing. I think what I want to tell all of our parents is that as much as we want to plan right at this moment to help guide you, we don't want a bad plan. And we also don't want a plan that we have to change every week because something else is coming out. We want to have a thoughtful plan. We want to have as much guidance as possible. We want to tackle as many of these layers as possible. We want to make sure we are as consistent. So that way, when we give you the information, we know that we're pretty sure that's what we're going to be doing in different situations so that parents have the information. I have a plan that I started a couple of weeks ago, and the information we've gotten in the last 3 weeks, or even this week, has completely changed what I've already written. And so it's almost like starting from scratch because what I thought was true is no longer true. So,
Aaron, a couple of thoughts. So thank you for all of the detail. I think the timing of all this is going to be really interesting. So as you build these draft plans, it would seem to me that we're going to be in phase 4 when we go back in August. Hopefully, hopefully we don't regress, and it's unlikely we'll be in phase 5. And so when I think about timing is, from what you shared, you will not have a draft phase 4 plan created and run through your advisory committee prior to our June meeting. So that we as a board can comment and give direction to the administration on that. I'm a bit concerned about that, and not saying that folks are not going as quick as we can, but I think we have to look at how can we have more of a solid plan that this board can give you guidance on and advice on and feel comfortable with in that June meeting.
Right.
Or do we have to potentially, because I don't know if I want to wait till end of July, do we have to do a mid-July special meeting? And I also don't necessarily know if I want to do that and commit everyone for that. But I think we have to be very particular about the timing of this. I think we also need to figure out, it's likely the state, just like they did in the last week or so for various types of businesses, and I think they did a fairly good job, at least, of different types of businesses providing guidance. I think we obviously want that for phase 4, which we probably won't get until close to phase 4 starts towards the end of June, and we got to mix that. I'm not necessarily, Aaron, when I look for, the administration's perspective, I'm not necessarily looking for a perspective from the administration, will we have to wear masks? I am guessing that type of decision will be mandated to us by the governor and or ISB. I'm looking for, how do we handle a mask situation? How do we handle a mask situation when there's a student who can't wear a mask? How do we handle, Laura's comment about a student who can't come because immunocompromised and all these other things? That's, to me, the importance of our plan. Some of this stuff, quite honestly, will likely be dictated to us, which takes it out of your hands and out of our hands as a board. But again, the more that we can have in June or have to react to would be great.
We have a pretty extensive update with you, and I would even love to have had our meeting prior to the June meeting, which is June 25th.
Yeah.
And I had already put in there an update, a robust. If we could do more, that would be great. I also wanted to leave a little bit for our curriculum and instruction person to give us an eye when she started too, to kind of deliver the full thing. Our full intent is to give a more comprehensive update at where we are.
Okay. And then in regards to bus, and I think one of the public comments was about bus. I think it's a very good point. For school, as a parent, it's probably not that big of a decision I have to make. Either I decide to send my kid to school or send them to a private or homeschool them. I don't really have a bunch of options, right? And yet for bus, there's a couple of good options. There's either bus or find another way to get my kid to school. I think we have to figure out a way to let parents make a much closer to real-time decision on that, because that's as much of a comfort thing as anything else. As a parent, I'll send my kid to school likely if the governor and ISB tells me I have to. I'm going to make a family-based decision based on whether or not I think it's appropriate for the bus. So I would encourage as an administration that we look at how do we adjust and figure out how we can let more real-time bus-based decisions happen. Meaning, even if we're open, people don't start on the bus, but they want to join the bus a month later, or whatever that looks like. I know it's likely an administrative disruption, but I would love to see those
disruption for us, because that is not a hard thing for us to do. It's more for us communicating with the routing of the buses and how to do that. So I think that's part of our June meeting with them is what is that time frame they need? Are there different alternatives that we have? And I've heard, and I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to throw out something and people think that's what's going to happen. But I've heard of some different possible scenarios that we might want to consider.
But we just have to ask them for more real-time decisioning and something. It cannot be business as usual. You sign up by May 1 and for your bus for the year. That's not the world we're in.
No, nothing has been business as usual right now.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll check. Okay, then I think we can go on to our next, if there's no more questions.
Okay, thanks, Erin. Thanks, guys. So the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the April 23rd, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of Education, to approve the minutes of the April 23rd, 2020 closed meeting of the Board of Education, to approve warrants for the first half of the month of May in the amount of $812,000, $72.83, to approve warrants for the second half of the month of April in the amount of $840,067.81, to approve payroll for the first half of the month of May in the amount of $438,330.38, to approve payroll for the second half of the month of April in the amount of $429,861.22, to approve the personnel report as submitted, and to accept donations.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, on a roll call, Laura. I'm just going by my screen. Laura?
Aye.
Daphne?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Bob? Nancy? You're muted, Nancy.
Aye.
Bob? Jeff?
Aye.
Bob? Bob?
Bob, you're muted. Oops. I'm sorry, Bob, we just can't hear you. You're muted.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay, we're good. So we're on a roll call. Do the consent agenda. Do you approve?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
Alright.
just point out before we move on?
Sure, of course.
I just wanted to make a note of the donations that we did receive this month. We did get a donation from PTO for out of Project Reach, so we appreciate that. And we also did collect the check of $120,000 from the Education Foundation. So I just wanted to make a note of that, so everyone knew that the district did receive those funds. And we definitely appreciate all the effort that they put out this year to make that happen. So, and the last couple of years, because it was
That is wonderful.
multi-year purpose. Yeah. So thank you so much. Just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, thank you to our parent organizations. That's fantastic. So, moving on to action items. So the first one is to approve a one-year contract extension for Assistant Superintendent of Finance and Operations / CSBO, Catherine Loria, until June 30th, 2022. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? We're good. On a roll call, Laura?
Aye.
Daphne?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
And Jeff?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And then the next action item is to approve a one-year contract extension for the Director of Special Education, Dr. Janine Grun, until June 30th, 2022. May I have a motion?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Okay, any questions, comments? On a roll call, Laura,
Aye.
Daphne,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and Jeff.
Aye.
Thank you. And then may I have a motion to approve a one-year contract extension for Winkleman Prison Principal, Dr. Erica Berger, until June 30th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Great. And then on a roll call, Laura,
Aye.
Daphne,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
and Jeff.
Aye.
And I forget to, and it's unanimously approved. Congratulations to all of you. We're really grateful to have you guys on our team. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And to the next action item is the approval of Providence Capital Network LLC government obligation contract for grades 3 through 5 Chromebooks.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy.
Yes, thank you. So I know that we had to contact the board a little ahead of time to know that we were trying to move forward with this as soon as we can. This year's agreement is for 350 HP Chromebook 11 devices. And securing this lease is in line with the refresh schedule of our one-to-one devices for our students. This year is year 3 of 3 for the 3 through 5 devices. And Dave Del Bosio, our manager of technology, began researching options, pricing, and availability as early as he could, with the potential that it may be a little more difficult to obtain these when everyone needed to go remote. So fortunately, we were able to secure the devices, and we did decide, with the many unknowns there are right now during this pandemic and with the financial condition of the state and things like that, that we wanted to just move forward with a lease agreement financed through Providence Capital. And then the actual payment processing will be will be assigned to Kansas State Bank. We've worked in this kind of format with both of these companies for a number of leases, and it has worked very well for us. There were a number of documents that were included in the board packet, two of which are the general obligation contract and the Exhibit B, which is the payment schedule. The payment schedule details the principal and interest payments for the next 3 years. And tonight we're recommending the approval of both of these documents. Once the approval is received, I'll complete the package and submit it to Providence. Does anyone have any questions about the lease?
Okay. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. On a roll call, Laura,
Aye.
Daphne,
Aye.
Maria,
Hi.
Bob,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Jeff.
Aye.
Okay, and our final action item for the evening, determination of payment to first student during COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, thank you. So there was a lot of information put in the board packet regarding this topic. We discussed the ask from First Student to support their drivers and other staff members by continuing to pay some of the bills while we were not receiving transportation services. And at a point, it was important because this would help secure the driver's employment. So should school restart, they would be fully staffed and ready to resume services for our district. As the executive orders by the governors started being issued, the picture of returning to school became more unlikely, and which eventually did come to fruition, as we all know. And at that point, each of the 5 districts within the current contract with First Student had to determine how they were going to move forward. Initially, the efforts were to move forward together. That really was not working for all of us to do the same plan, so we each kind of went in our separate ways to make that determination. And for 2 of the districts out of the 5, which is District 31 and District 27, the bus contract for next year was awarded to North Shore Transit, as we spoke about a number of times. So the board packet includes information to help make a decision for District 31. And when we get down to it, I am recommending we do not make any further payments to First Student, and I'll tell you why. One thing I do want to mention, if the board does decide to make a payment, we would have to have an amendment for the contract, which I did include one that we could possibly use for the district. But part of my issue with it is when you have a contract or an amendment to a contract, there should be consideration for both parties. And at this point, knowing that transportation was finished and it wasn't being provided because there was no school, basically our contract was ended. And outside of just showing good faith, which I did discuss last month, I could not find any consideration that would go towards the district to make this payment. So I was a little challenged with moving forward with making any payment at this point. The other piece, the cost that was calculated to reimburse families amounts to just over $42,000. And that would cover the 52 days missed, which was about 29% of the year. And so I provided some estimates on the remainder of the year, which I have in here, and I will go through those attachments. So the first attachment, or actually the second page of the memo, that shows an estimate of the bus costs for the remainder of the year. So at this point in the year, we have paid through March. We did pay that 1 week that was considered an active God week. We did not pay for spring break. And so at this point, from March 30th to the end of the year is what is in question.
Kathy, quick question on the payment we made for the Active God Week. Was that at 100% or was that at some discount?
That was about $7,000 for that week. It was 100% because that was before We were determined closed. Yeah, shut down. Okay, so in the chart, it basically shows I do have the April invoice, so I was able to put that actual amount in. A 22% discount would show it to be $27,850. May I estimated based on last year's percentage increase from April to May, and I actually underestimated it. I received a first student invoice today for May, and it was at $44,842, and the 22% discount cost was almost $35,000. And then in June, I was estimating it to be about $18,900. So what that means is without a discount, the remaining months would be almost $100,000 because the 92 has been increased by $6,000. And the cost with the 22% discount would be about over $75,000. So right underneath that, there's options for payment through April 17th, which was what the directive was from the board. If we were looking at it, that would be a good date to pay through. And so when I looked at the April invoice, I was able to see the number of AM routes and the number of days for both schools, PM routes. So I detailed that out at the regular route cost of $83.04 per route. And that came up to $26,000, just over $26,000. So when I was trying to come up with options and a percentage to pay, I listed 20, 40, 60, and then 78%. Once I started doing the amendment to the agreement, I decided to put in an option of 0% with $0. I can tell you that the other district we will be working with next year, that is how their board moved forward with no further payments. So if you move on to, there would be a calendar in there. I just put that in just to how I determine the number of days. And then there's also a to and from route only sheet. And again, these were estimates that we put together that I discussed a little bit on the prior page. But what I wanted to point out was our contract assumed a 3% rate in route cost from each of the 3 years, okay? And what we've actually paid, if we consider it with a discount, we would have paid 13% more instead of 3 just for the to and from routes. And without the discounts, we would have paid 20% more. And basically, this is due to the fact that there was a need to add more bus routes because I think we all remember the fall, it became a little difficult. And not only that, they ended up unpairing us when we had been paired the 2 prior years. So that did increase our cost significantly. And also, I wanted to put down there the amount of fees we collected for this year. So with $148,000 being collected from fees, it shows that the fees covered 39% of the cost, or 41%, depending on which column you look at, which means the district subsidizes 60% of that. So again, I have an amendment in here, and you know, we had a number. We've been working with so many different amendments as we were trying to get through this initially. So I kind of worked with one that I felt like, you know, we could customize and work best for us. Section 1 is the amount that we would fill in with a percentage should the board decide to do this. And if the board does decide to issue them any kind of payment, I would make sure that the consideration that I put in there for the district would suffice as a legitimate contract amendment. So that's why with all that happening and really with not much consideration coming towards the district, except maybe some potential future relationship, I felt it was best to recommend we pay nothing further.
Kathy, can I ask if we do that, do you think that they might come back and sue us? And would that, would that end up costing us even more money?
They
just
cannot,
looking.
yeah, they cannot come back and sue us. We have no legal obligation to pay them because the service is ended. So once the service ends and the contract isn't being fulfilled, there is no contract and they cannot come back and sue us.
Okay. Just want to know.
Kath,
Thank you.
do we have any understanding? I know we talked briefly about it last month. Did they retain their drivers on their payroll through April 17th when school was canceled for the remainder of the year?
Well, I actually had a conversation with Brian Williams today from First Student, and he did share that they kept some on, and they also ended up furloughing a number of drivers. He did not give me the dates. He also did tell me that they ended up settling with a much lower percentage for District 30 and 28, which he said did not cover the drivers, but covered some other staff. So to me, it wasn't as clear as I had hoped it to be. And I think they settled it I think it was 40% is where they ended up with that. So, and those are two districts that are continuing service with First Student next year.
Okay, and then just for clarity, so if I'm understanding the days and everything that you've shared with us, inclusive of page 85 and 87 in the packet, we've paid 100% for the 5 days of the act of God. That would be March 16th through March 20th. And we've
Correct.
paid 0 at this time for anything past March, past and inclusive of March 30th. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? All right.
So I guess some discussion about what the board would feel more comfortable with.
Do you want to take Kathy's recommendation and just not pay anything else to First Student, or is there an amount the board would like to vote on?
Can you clarify just one more time? Did you guys never ask them to hold on till a certain date so that you knew for sure we weren't going back to school? That never happened on our part?
Did we ever ask the bus company to hold on?
Yeah.
Well, I think the intent was if everyone continued to pay their bills, and the only one that, really came up front first was District 225. They have continued to pay at the 78%. Actually, RG calculated the 22% discount. The other districts, when I talked to District 30 maybe a week or two ago, they hadn't made a decision yet, but from a conversation with Brian, it seems like they did make that decision. So, the hope was that they kept them, but there was a lot of question as to were they getting funding? How do we know they're keeping them? Will they give us certified payroll so we could back up that they are actually keeping their staff hired? So there was a lot of unknowns, and it took a long time, and everyone was thinking about going in a different direction. So there was nothing firm in place.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure.
If we had asked them to wait, and then, how many weeks of that did we request for them to wait in a sense? And this way we know if we've actually paid them up to date and we're comfortable not giving them anything because we feel that that you feel that we've completely paid them up to time, rendered, then fine, then we don't send them anything and we're comfortable with that. I just want to make sure that we didn't, there was nothing that they're going to come back and be like, well, you made us wait and you asked us to wait until this date. And I was just clarifying.
Yeah, and actually, I'm very confident we never said that, and they never expected us. I also heard that they just were writing us off like they're never going to pay us anything. So there was no commitment from either end. But, if you want, because I have the April invoice, these are actual numbers of what, if you chose 20%, what you would pay. And, and another reason, quite frankly, is if the beginning of the school year doesn't start out with transportation, this is a company that we do have to make sure they're keeping their drivers. So I don't know what that entails yet for us. I would assume since we have a contract, we would be having to do something with them. So,
Okay. Yeah,
So we'd rather do something with North Shore in the fall because we will need their services longer term than right now.
Yeah, so, for me, Kathy, I'm very mixed here, right? I don't like paying for services that we didn't receive. And at the same time, we had an agreement with the supplier, and hopefully the supplier in good faith was going to be ready to bus our students should we have continued. So like we talked about at the April meeting, I do believe we should pay them some dollar amount through April 17th. Given what you just said about the uncertainty of how good faith they were in terms of keeping their drivers and everyone on payroll, I'm not convinced I'm there at 78% anymore. Then I don't know exactly what percent. Maybe we just go 50%. And quite honestly, I'm thinking that 50% should, from a calculation perspective, even go to the Act of God week, right? This is about money to keep things going because we have already paid 100% for that week. So when we calculate what we would pay them, to me, I would calculate some sort of differential versus the 100% we paid for that week and 50%. So my proposal is that we end up paying for a student 50% from every day we did not use them from March 16th through the day school was canceled April 17th. And I'm
going to agree with you there because of the experience that we had with them, I feel that we can't believe everything that they're saying, that they actually held all those people. They already said that they didn't hold everybody. They may have held a few. Would those few have been able to accommodate us at that time, or were they going to have some of the same problems getting people to work for them, just like we did at the beginning of the school year? So that's why I disagree. I would go with Kathy in saying that if she feels that we've paid them enough, then we don't have to pay them anymore.
And I do want to add one comment that Brian said to me, so I can't verify it, but he did tell me that our new bus company has the opportunity to hire some of her students' drivers because the drivers who are driving for District 31 really appreciated how the principals and assistant principals treated them, talked to them, knew their first names. So I'm, just sharing that that's what he shared with me. So I'm not sure of details behind that. I have not talked to North Shore Transit about that because I just talked to Brian at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock today. But anyway, just wanted to put that out.
Hey, Kathy?
Yes.
So can you did you want board discussion or do you want do we vote on your recommendation? I think we can discuss these details all the time, but really the board's supposed to vote on your recommendation unless we disagree with it. Can you just restate your recommendation, please?
Sure. Well, what my recommendation said is at this time, the recommendation is to approve 0% payment to the contractor as there is no reasonable consideration afforded to the district. So if we make a payment, we need an amendment. I want an amendment that's sound and has consideration for both parties. Right now, I'm not sure if good faith is enough consideration. So that's basically where it's coming from.
I mean, typically the board discusses and votes on contracts and things of that sort, but if we, can we just vote? Can we agree? I support Kathy's recommendation. Does anybody else want to discuss or do you support it?
I'm fine with Kathy's recommendation as well.
Me too. So, may I have a motion to approve to accept Kathy's recommendation to not make any further payments to First Student?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, on a roll call. Daphne,
Aye.
Maria,
Aye.
Nancy. Oh, Nancy? Nancy?
She's frozen. I've been frozen on and off, which is why I keep turning stuff off.
Oh, there she is.
I am back. I did cough again. It keeps knocking me off. I agree with Kathy's recommendation. Sorry.
Sorry, I can see her moving, so I thought she just couldn't hear me. So I was like, oh, all right, no problem, Nancy. Sorry. Laura,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
and Jeff.
Nay.
Okay, and I from Melissa. Okay. Information and discussion items.
May I ask one question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
In terms of the parent refund, so like full-time riders are going to get, what was the percentage back?
So what I did was I came up with that 29%, which was the number of days out of the school year. So we made a schedule of what everyone has paid to date. And so people who, no matter what their payment was, we looked at what the charge was, what was actually paid, and then determined how much they should get or still owe, because some people are on payment plans.
Okay.
So we don't want to give back more than they should get back. So we have it all calculated. I didn't bring that spreadsheet with me, but we have it all figured out. So if people were on payment and they would not owe us anymore based on the refund, we are contacting them and not taking any further payments. Or if after the refund they still owe us some money, if they can make that payment, we have contacted them. So we're just kind of moving forward so it's very fair and equitable for all.
Okay, thank you.
Kathy,
Yes.
Kathy, I just have one quick question with respect to the amendment. It's got the times of when Governor Pritzker issued executive orders. The first one being closed through March 30th, then closed through April 7th, and then on April 17 announcing that they'll be closed through the end of the school year. There seems to be a gap between April 7th and April 17th.
Well, I think at some point they just extended the original executive order. But if we're not going to pay anything, we don't need this at all.
Okay, I just wanted to point out that there seemed to be a gap on the dates
Yeah.
there.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. And I would have fixed it if we needed it. So thank you.
Okay. So on a roll call, I'm sorry, let me finish that.
We finished that one. Administrative.
I got thrown because Maria had asked a question. Information and discussion items, administrative reports. Dr. Janine Gruen, annual RCA designation for special education.
Yeah, so I'm really proud to announce that District 31 received an LEA determination of meets requirement in all 6 compliance indicators and the IDEA audit findings. This means that the special education department is timely in all special education evaluations. We've had procedures in place to identify students with various needs, backgrounds, disabilities, and ethnicities. We identify students who are transitioning from early intervention to preschool, as well as we provide transition plans for students who are 14 and a half years old. And we had no audit findings with our IDEA grant or other non-compliance corrections. Therefore, we scored a 4.0 in all areas and received a meets requirements for the local education agency determination from the Illinois State Board of Education.
That is the highest we can be.
Yes.
So great job.
Good job, Janine.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, that's great.
We want to share the good stuff.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And Janine, and I believe you've gotten this feedback throughout this year that, there's always challenges, but we appreciate how far the special education department has come under your direction. So,
well, thank you.
yeah, and this is feedback that we've gotten from families, from teachers throughout the year. So thank you.
Oh, that means a lot to me. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, okay, Kathy, Loria, you are on again with monthly budget reports, P-card summary sheets, and facilities update.
Okay, I will go through a very brief summary, excuse me, of the April monthly reports. So on the treasurer's report, the bank reconciliation, we're showing an $18.6 million fund balance. That includes $2 million invested in a max account at PMA. Also, you could see on the treasurer's report, which will also match the general ledger summary, those deferred revenues of $138,935, that really represents the amount of fees we've collected so far for next year. So just so you have that information, which I think is a little bit low for April. I have seen a number of things come through for May. The next page, the investment summary, we have about $15.346 million invested at this time, and you could see the rates have declined to 0.832, which is to be expected at this point in time with all that is happening. If you look at the general ledger summary, again, I'm pointing out the amount of deferrals, those negative numbers down towards the bottom, that's the 138,000. Also, we're showing our capital projects balance at $1,006,000, which is after that transfer from working cash. For the monthly summary, the budget report for
Kathy, you're muted.
Kathy.
Sorry, I stepped on that. Sorry, okay. So I'm not sure what you heard, but as far as the monthly budget summary for April, our revenues are showing that they are lower than the same time last year, and that is mainly due to that property tax refund that we discussed. Also, there's a little difference in Social Security and IMRF, those two funds. We worked a little bit on that with the levy to kind of mix things up a little bit to get them back to a normal level. And so that would affect some discrepancy there. And then as far as the expenditures, the Ed Fund is a little more than 5% difference. Transportation is going to be caught up a little bit this month with the extra payments we made. We will be going over our transportation expense budget. And most of that is due to, we do have to pay special ed transportation, whether there's services or not. So that's another thought that, came my way when I was thinking of providing more money to a vendor for no services. But since NSSED contracts out special ed transportation, and the agreement they have with the company is for us to be paying, so districts have to continue to pay the special ed. And then in general, overall, the operating expenses are a little over 6% or within 6% from the prior year. And looking at the last couple of months, it looks like the expenses for operating funds have increased about 10% a month. And the chart just illustrates what we've seen in the other information, that our revenues are lower and our expenses are higher to date. I will say we did receive some state reimbursements, some mandated categorical funding that I wasn't thinking we would get. We only got one payment for FY22 to date, and we're supposed to get 4, but we did get a second one, so that was good news. Any questions with that?
Kathy, with the revenues continuing to be less than prior years at this point, expenses continuing to be above prior years at this point, are you projecting any changes to our end financials for the current school year?
Well, The property tax receipts are such a main component of our revenues, and since we did take that hit, I think it will affect us as we've discussed the last couple of meetings. So, I also try to look on the expenses that we are not incurring since we've been shut down. So I'm hopeful that that helps. We have had to continue paying teachers their regular salaries, of course, and stipends that they do on a continual basis. But there's utility costs that should be lower, printing costs that are lower, overtime. Overtime for our custodians is non-existent right now. So I'm hoping in that regard that we will be saving some money on that end. So, we'll just see how things pan out at this point. I have delayed any movement with the camera going out for RFPs for the camera work, just to kind of see where we end up. But we could do that this summer too. So just trying to watch as we go forward. But yeah.
Because we had planned from a budgetary perspective, roughly $750,000 surplus. And you don't yet have a projection for where we may end up?
No, I really don't. I did last month. I kind of tried to project and shared with you all what I anticipated are the remainder of the year revenues and expenses. I have not had time to redo that projection for this month. But again, like I mentioned, we did get some unexpected receipts from the state. So that should help in that direction as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And the facilities update, I will just talk a little bit and show you a couple pictures. At Winkleman, the north parking lot, the asphalt binder course has been installed, and the walking path towards the neighborhood to the back, that is also installed. If you've been there, you've seen the permeable pavers installed in the islands, and those are to help with the water flow and absorption of any water. Bollards are up, just like, the bollards out in front of field, those posts over by the drive up for parents. So those are installed over at Winkland. There's new light poles and fixtures installed, and the trash enclosure fence has partially been installed. Landscape restoration has begun. They've been putting black dirt, sod, tree plantings installed at the north parking lot islands along the new sidewalks and walking path and around the new playground area. For the detention area, they have a rough detention pond expansion excavation completed, and there's a concrete stormwater overflow structure, which I'll show you in one of the pictures, and that's to help prevent overflow in certain areas during a heavy rain. There's still some sewer work that needs to be done, but they definitely need to wait for some drier weather. They can't really pull these big pieces of equipment onto really wet ground. It does more damage. And as far as expected work, the week of June 1st, they expect to have the asphalt surface course at the parking lot installed and patching of the existing South Drive. I'm sure many of you noticed the holes that continually pop up over on that South Drive at Winkleman. They should complete the trash enclosure fence. The striping and signage should be installed. The landscape will continue with the north lot, and they'll begin black dirt spreading at the detention pond. And by mid-June, they hope to complete the black dirt at the detention pond, regrade and hydroseed the area of the south of the playground between the fire lane, and hydroseed the detention pond. And then they could also crack fill and seal coat the rest of the parking lot. So like the south end and the west end parking lot, that will be seal coated and striped. And then so they're looking for a completion date of June for the Winkleman parking lot. As far as field, I don't know if anyone noticed the amount of water that was being retained in the detention pond, but there was very slow drainage of the stormwater and the detention pond, and it was discovered that there was a blockage on Techney Road. And so that blockage has been removed, and they've been watching the flow of the water on a regular basis, and it seems able to be flowing freely right now. And the contractor will continue to check and confirm that restrictors were installed properly and all the other mechanisms are making the stormwater receive fully. Soccer fields, since we had a record May rainfall, that has hampered the construction progress with the soccer field. But we hope the contract can remobilize after June 1st to perform the several days it takes to prepare for the hydro seeding. And at that point, the rock and the debris will also be removed and hydro seeding to follow. So I'm just going to show a couple pictures that he sent me, the architect, and so you could see what's going on if you haven't yet. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. Okay, so it's just a very brief little facilities update of pictures. So this is that stormwater control structure I was talking about. He sent it to me and I had no idea what it was. So he gave me that bit of an explanation, but help control the overflow. This is the permeable pavers. You can see the brickwork on the islands in the north parking lot. And this is facing east, I believe. And then this is another view of the parking lot. You could see the new lighting that's there, the bollards over at the side by Winkleman. So that's a view to the east of the north lot. We also have this view, which is also of the north lot, but it's facing west. And that's towards the back of the parking area. And then this is the detention area at Winkleman. And so they're expanding that and making sure that we follow and meet all the guidelines and requirements by the village and the MWRD. And that was the last one. Okay. Okay. Any questions on that? No questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Mhm.
Board reports. I have nothing to report from the Northfield Township of Board Presidents. Daphne Frank, Glenview Planning Commission.
Nothing.
Okay, Laura Greenberg, EdRed. Nothing. Nancy Hammer, Ed Foundation, PTO.
Yes. Ed Foundation is kind of status quo right now. And I'm looking up the other stuff. Sorry, went ahead. For the PTO, they had their last meeting, and they had I have it here somewhere. They had their last meeting. They did it virtual. Meredith has come down from. She had stepped down from being the president, so that role is now open. Let's see. Hang on a second. Okay, so she stepped down. Other people have stepped in to fill a few of the other roles. So the president's position is open. Margot Schwartz-Newton is taking on, I think, communications. Anuja and Mindy are going to be the treasurers. Megan Millen, hang on, where am I? Is secretary now. And then, hang on. And then we have Lisa Brown and Laurel Shaw are going to be co-student affairs, and fundraising, community relations. So there's a lot more positions that are now opening because lots of people stepped down. The financials seem to be sound. They're at about 60K in the bank. And then they also are planning to scale back on some of their events next year due to the current pandemic situation. The fifth grade parents have the t-shirts to hand out at the parade on June 2nd, and the DVD montages will be handed out at a later date. And then we did give, I think, the gifts to the schools were approved, the recess equipment for Winkleman and ping pong for Field. And that's it.
Thanks, Nancy. Bob, Northbrook Economic Development Committee?
The meeting that was scheduled for April 8th was canceled. Kathy, I don't recall if it was rescheduled in May or not.
There have not been any in-person meetings or online meetings. I know Tom Poupard from the Village has been sending out a lot of interesting articles about the economy and how things are moving along and what's happening in other areas as points of interest, but we have had no meetings.
Okay. And Jeff, the Stakeholder Financial Advisory Committee?
Nothing on the Stakeholder Financial Advisory Committee, but there is some stuff around NSSCD.
Yeah, NSSCD.
So as talked about earlier, I was a representative at the May call. Thank you, Aaron. At the May call, it was a remote meeting similar to this. And one thing, and Melissa, particularly if you're going to represent us in June, they are going to be taking a vote on a brand refresh, which will include a new name and a new logo. I think this has kind of been talked about here before. I apologize. I didn't realize this wasn't included in our packet until about an hour or two before the meeting. So I asked Aaron at least to display it here and we can get it out to everybody. This is a 44-page deck, so I don't think we want to go through it in any grave detail. But if I can ask Aaron, you to go to slide 17. Just to kind of walk through a couple of things, and then we'll see if there's questions from the group. But there's been a timeline. So this started way back in, from what I'm told, 2017. The concern was the name and the look, right? The look from a brand perspective was stale, and the name having special education in it didn't include all of the services that potentially NSSCD could or wanted to offer. Leverage some of the opportunities that we've talked about in some of the financial things, like maybe leveraging the district for PD in different ways. So they've gone through several different rounds of names and logos and the like. And I'm just going to jump to the punchline if we can, which is on slide 36. They are recommending to rename it to True North Educational Cooperative 804. And a couple of things from my notes on this name. I wasn't part of any of these focus groups, of course, right there. Thank you, Aaron. Or anything. But what they had a couple other names that they didn't think, again, met the need. True North, in their mind, it kind of shows a vision, a destiny, a journey, and some progress. One thing they called out, which was the first thing I kind of thought of, is wait a second, that looks like a compass as an O, and it's not really pointing what you and I would think would be north. But they kind of wanted something like that because everyone's north is different depending on where you are. And so it shows the distinct and differences between different perspectives and different students. The other thing you'll see in there is the district number, just like us and every other district. They do have an official state district number, which is 804, and it was never included in there before. By including Educational Cooperative 804, it now feels like it's actually a district, as opposed to if it was just True North, it would be a company or a brand. Candidly, I don't have any passion one way or the other around this. I have not been with that group long enough to have a perspective and didn't go through the additional rounds of feedback. just to be clear, the feedback that they used was students and parents and other stakeholders. And again, I think round 1 was not changing the name. Round 2 and 3 were changing the names, leading to this, which was one of 2 concepts that they ended up presenting in round 4. They did not share with us in the meeting what the other concept was. Again, we're going to be asked, go to slide 39, please, Aaron, 3 ahead. We're going to be asked in the June meeting to take an action item to direct the administration of current NSSED to begin preparing to do this name change. And then there will be several other adoption timelines per this slide over the course of the next couple of months. The effective date or recommended or planned effective date for the name and branding change would be July 1 for the July 1, 2021 for the 21-22 academic year. So I will pause there. I think our job tonight is probably to give our attending board member, Melissa, guidance whether or not, we would approve that or not.
Does anyone have an opinion or?
I mean, if you're asking the administrative, I think we're fine with it.
Okay.
I mean, it's their name. I mean, I think it's,
It's kind of how I feel.
I mean, rebranding it's but not personally convicted one way or another.
Okay. And I think that they changing it to education cooperative instead of special ed cooperative was important for them, because I think whatever direction they're going lends itself to more different services that are being provided. So, and I personally, when the business managers had a chance to give their input, I did choose this one over the other. So.
And the superintendent's got a chance to look at the brands. This is the one I chose over the other ones, given that we had to make a choice.
Yeah, and the directors of special education also had input. And I also chose this one as well. We saw the first 2 that they rolled out, and those were eliminated right off the bat. Nobody really cared for them. They changed the colors and the names, and then this one, based on, what they really wanted to portray, we felt really kind of captured what they wanted to do.
Okay. All right. Then I will go and support it. So, okay.
Melissa, I will volunteer for the July meeting if we need
Okay.
people, right?
Traditionally, they don't have a July meeting, so if they don't, can you do August?
Sure.
Well, all right. Thanks a lot, Daphne. I appreciate it.
And then I will be representing the Northfield Township as the superintendent for the year. So I will be at them next year, but I cannot represent the board.
Right.
So I cannot vote for you guys, but I will be there as representing our township.
Great.
It's my turn.
Okay. And I think at the July, our board meeting, we should probably look at their calendar and make sure that we have a representative from District 31 signed up for those. So we'll do that like we did for this year.
Okay.
Okay. Maria.
I have nothing.
Okay. Thank you. And student enrollment.
Student enrollment went up by 5. We're still seeing students move in. We are taking registrations by appointment and taking care of that. Next month, I'll start giving you who's registered by class. Right now, I can tell you for pre-K through 8, we have 484 submitted registrations and 15 started but not submitted. So we're starting to go up there. So I'm hoping next month we'll have a better sense of numbers and who's signing up, so we can start looking at that in terms of sectioning. But we don't have enough right now for it to make any sense.
Will we have signs like please register when people at the schools when they're going to drop off their stuff?
That's an excellent idea. Let's get some registration signs out there.
So so that just as a reminder, like everything is so disconnected. So at least we know people will be coming to the schools.
May I ask, should they technically be allowed to keep their devices beyond the school year if they have not registered to come? I haven't thought my question through, but I just figured.
I mean, I think part of it is a little bit of the logistics because we're already trying to figure out who didn't sign the waiver versus not. Our attorneys, I asked them and they were comfortable with the way the waiver was written with the intent to return at this point. So I think we could be more rigid, but
can we? I would agree. I agree with Maria. I think we need to have them registered.
Yep.
Okay.
Given that we're not requiring payment, so it's the time to go through the process and declare your intent. I think it's a great way for us to understand the community's intent.
So if that is the board's intention, then we can start sorting through the waivers that we're getting and contacting families if they haven't registered yet. I'm not seeing any disagreement, so then I will figure that one out tomorrow.
Yeah, I think clearly just logistically, since it's next week, having some real, you're gonna have to figure out how to communicate this in the best way to let people know. Yeah.
My goodness, we'll have to make some phone calls from the people who are signing up, and then we can look for the ones who haven't and encourage. Yeah, we'll figure that out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with Maria or with Daphne. It's more of, to your point, logistically, how will we get them back, even from people if they don't have them in the car? So, all right.
Let me see what I can sort out.
Okay. Then, are we done with student enrollment then?
Yep.
Okay. Freedom of Information Act requests, no FOIAs?
No.
Okay. And then discussion items, consideration of calendar adjustments for 2020 and 2021.
Okay, so it's interesting right now because even though we have a calendar approved at this point, they don't really have any guidance out there for next year. There is some stuff on the governor's desk to be signed that would allow a hybrid day to count as a day, that would count remote learning. I mean, to do stuff with the calendar. Something else that's on his desk is and that's been approved by both the General Assembly, the House and the Senate, is to make next November 3rd, I think it is, state holiday. So we cannot hold school, even though we were planning to. So regardless, we're going to have to go back and look at our calendar. So that's not a question, and get a new one approved. But I do have a few questions for you for doing this. One, our current adopted calendar that no longer can be adopted because too much of the world has changed. By the way, I want to assure parents out there, we will not substantially change the start. We were not planning to change the start of school, winter break, spring break, days that are already off. It's just some of these emergency days and when the end of the year is, and if we're forced to take a day off for election. So I don't want anyone to go, oh my gosh, are we looking at the calendar? We don't know what it is yet. We're not looking at those. There's just some subtle things that we have to look at. Right now we have 2 emergency days built into the year. Clearly we're looking more, we now have more of a remote learning system. So even if we have a snow day, we're more equipped to do something remote learning. But also given the inconsistencies that we might be facing next year, do we want to go ahead and adopt a calendar that has 5 days at the end of the year as opposed to 2 days in the middle of the year, so we don't have a random day off? That would be the first thing. I would just need a thumbs up or thumbs down. You wouldn't have to vote on it yet.
Erin, what's 225 doing if we want to think about aligning for parents that,
You know what? I think they're looking at their calendar too. Right now, they have 2 emergency days in the middle of the year. What I've found is the high school being out of session is not as big of a deal as the middle school being out of session. But my guess is they might have to take a look at some of this too. So I don't know. We don't have to touch those, or do you want me to go ahead and maybe put them at the end of the year?
I don't have a preference. Do you have a recommendation?
My guess, in the past, I was always like, we want them built in throughout the year because everyone, those snow days, no one wants to go longer in the year. However, those snow days, those emergency days were a little bit of a pain for people as we were doing remote learning because they didn't make sense. So my guess, my feeling is right now with the inconsistencies that we would put them at the end of the year. Okay. I'm seeing some thumbs up. So unless I hear differently, then I will go forward with that. So that would just shorten possibly when school would end, but it could possibly lengthen it if we have snow days. I don't know with remote learning if that's even possible anymore. So I don't know. Item 2, and this one, could go, you may want to talk further in closed session because it could impact like collective bargaining agreements, but the board purchased 5 additional days of school in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement. As we're talking about some financial considerations, we can choose not to do those 5 days and put that money back in the budget. I've also been doing some research on school calendar, and I think we can keep the 180 days in our calendar, and we would just change the number of like teacher institute days we have. I don't even know if we'd have to buy the 1 day that we thought we would have to buy. I'm still waiting for the new guidance to come out. So if I'm changing the calendar and bringing something for you to vote on next month, I will need to know how many days, if any, you would like me to add to our calendar. Not our existing, but a calendar. And as I said, because this also goes into collective bargaining, we may have to talk about that in closed, but we also want to be transparent and know that's on the docket for it to discuss, because that itself is not a closed session. So I'm hearing we postpone it till we finish our closed session, collective bargaining. Okay. Third one, legislation. I mean, if they make election day, our general election, presidential election on, I think it's November 3rd, a state holiday, we have no choice. We'll have to adjust the calendar. What's not on there right now is the election in March. The reason they are making this a state holiday for this year in November is to not have students in school when a lot of the public is coming in to vote in November, and trying to minimize the risk of spread. So the question would be, do you also want to look at the election day in the spring, which at this point is not covered by the General Assembly, but would be a District 31 decision? And I believe that day is April 6th. I see a thumbs down. I just don't want to make over the calendar too many times. So I want to try to put as many things in there.
Unless you think that they're going to make it a state holiday, in which case then you don't want to have to redo it again.
Well, at this point, that is not one that's listed.
Right.
Only the presidential election is listed. And I think the bill actually is a joint mail-in ballots. You can mail in votes and close schools. And make it
my logic for that thumbs down was simply, we've discussed this many times in the past, and we are keeping the general public separate from our students for safety reasons, shy of infectious diseases.
Right.
So if they're separated, and if we have some sort of sanitization, cleaning mechanism of the area the general public will be in prior to students returning to that area, I don't think it should impact our community and our students' days when we'll have parents who have to work on that day, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and the reality is, since it's only at the middle school, and if remote learning is allowed, there could possibly be that you could tell the middle school that they could remote learn that day and not the. I mean, I'm not saying that is an option, but that is something we could also explore.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing is, let's, provided that the state is making that a holiday, that we will adjust the calendar to have November election day as the no school day.
Erin?
Yes.
I thought we had, as a board, had a somewhat loose understanding that we wanted to optimize as many school days as possible, and we wanted to mirror 225 as much as possible.
Right.
Like, can we just agree those are the guiding principles? I thought that's what
this would still allow us to mirror 225. And this would still allow us to mirror 225 because the day off from school would be applied to them as well. It would be all public schools in the state of Illinois would be closed. The 5 days, that's another discussion for you guys, but where we put the emergency days, it would be more we're in session if they're not. I am not I will bring the calendar committee together to relook just to make sure we're ending on an appropriate date. I don't want to end like the Monday after Memorial Day and have kids come back for one day necessarily. So we'll just take a look at that. But the goal would still be to mirror the high school. We would just make these adjustments. Okay, that's what I needed. So I will work on that, and I may just need to bring the calendar committee remotely just to go over some of these changes. So we're good at that.
Okay, set Board of Education dates for 2020 and 2021.
Okay, I sent you some Board of Education dates. And let me just pull that up for you. Okay. Okay, so, okay, 2021 board meetings. So they'll either be held at the Field Middle School Learning Center or following the executive order. There is something that is also there's a lot of things on the governor's desk right now waiting to be signed that will better define virtual board meetings and extend them. Although one thing in there is a little bit weird. They want one person to actually be on site. So maybe at the next board meeting, I'll be sitting in the learning center by myself doing remote learning, but whatever, we'll follow up. The time is 7 o'clock, and here are the recommended dates. First one is Thursday, July 16th. We can make it earlier in the month if people want to, but that seemed to be a good time after 4th of July. August 20th, I actually had 2 dates for August. August 20th is the scheduled first day of school. I know not everyone loves having board meetings on the first day of school. An alternative we could do is Tuesday, August 25th. We cannot have it on the following Thursday because we need 30 days between the August and September Board of Education meeting. And the September one would be September 24th, unless that was changed. So that would be the big question.
I vote to not do it the first day of school.
Yeah, we all agreed not to do that again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of the administration, thank you for not doing it on the first day of school because there's a lot to do on the first day of school. So then I will take this date and make that the board meeting. So Tuesday, August 25th. Then we have September 24th, October 22nd, November 19th. We need at least 20 days between the November and December Board of Education meetings for the levy. Thursday, December 17th, that's right before winter break. But we again need to have the dates. January 21st, February 25th, March 18th, April 22nd. We need at least 45 days between the April Board of Education meeting and the last day of school. In addition, because of the election on April 6th, we need to have a meeting to reorganize the board. I think technically it's like the first week in May, but usually Cook County has certified results by then. If they don't have certified results, we may need to find another board meeting to reorganize the board. We have not had to do that in the past, but I just wanted to put that on there. Then May 20th and June 17th. Are people good with that?
I can't do May 20th, but you can proceed without me.
Any other dates not working for people, or we wouldn't have a quorum? I am not sure how long we'll be doing virtual board meetings. My guess is for several more months.
I can't think that far in advance.
Okay. Well, we have done it in the past where we've changed dates as we've gotten closer, as long as we give plenty of notice to the public. So then I will move forward with these dates.
Sorry, can you resend this to us when you've made your changes?
Yeah, I will redo this. We will put it on the website and I'll send you a link.
Awesome, thank you.
And I will fix that August one. I'm actually very grateful it's not the first day of school. So I think that's great. Okay.
Okay, and recognition of audience.
Let me check my one comment. Mindy Dapin, suggestion that if you put up signage at pickup, provide information on how to get a new login. Great suggestion. We will do that. And I will tell anyone who's listening, Wendy Steinberg is your go-to person to get the new login information. And what I'm finding is she's sending it out and it's ending up in people's spam folder because it comes from InfoSnap and not from the district. So for those listening.
Okay. And then may I have a motion to go into closed session to consider pending litigation, collective bargaining, the appointment, employment, compensation, or performance of specific employees in school security matters?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, on a roll call. Maria,
Aye.
Daphne,
Aye.
Laura,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
and I say aye. So we are now going into closed session.
And when we do come back into open, there are no action items. So we are just dismissing.
Okay.
So Nino can stop the live stream. And should the board take a 5-minute break?
Yeah.
Please. Please.
Please.
Okay.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy your phase 3 weekend.